Hi, it's Pastor Andy with a daily video today, and today I want to give just a really quick overview of an explanation for Romans chapters 9 through 11. But to do that, I need to start back in Romans chapter 1, because in Romans 1, 16 and 17, Paul gives his thesis for the letter. And in that, he talks about that the gospel is the power of salvation to the Jew first, and then to the Gentile, verse 16. And then in 17, he talks about the fact that God is going to make His righteousness, is going to reveal His righteousness, make it manifest, and that those who are righteous would live by faith. So since that moment, those sentences were written in Romans 1, 16 and 17, for the rest of the letter so far, Paul has laid out an argument for why works are not enough and why faith matters. And most of that argument has been against the Jewish people. At least from their perspective, they would see it that way. Now, in these chapters, what Paul is doing is showing he is not against them. He is truly for the Jews, or the Israelites, as he calls them in Romans 9:4, because he's one of them, and their lack of belief in this matter causes him a lot of suffering, because they do not and will not understand the truth of Jesus. So in Romans 3, Paul began to seemingly begin this part of the letter. In Romans 3, 1 through 8, he kind of begins to go down the path of what we have here in Romans 9 through 11, but he abruptly turns in Romans 3, 9, what we have is Romans 3, 9, and continues most of the argument that he had been making, and now he returns to this in Romans 9, and really in verses 6 through 29 that we'll see next week, Romans 9, 6 through 29, that's where he really answers those questions that he began to address in Romans 3. But ultimately what he's saying is, Jews do have a place, it's an important place, but God doesn't always do what people expect Him to do. Surprise. So to make this part of the argument, Paul has to show this aspect to the Israelites from their own history. He begins by appealing to Abraham, the father of the Jews, and shows that even with Abraham's sons, God takes a different path than what the Jews have come to know and expect. First off, in both cases, he takes the younger son. He takes Isaac instead of Ishmael, and he takes Jacob instead of Esau to set them apart for His purposes, meaning God takes them and God sets them apart for His purposes. He took the younger child in each case. Paul continues Romans 9 by showing that God's plans then do come to fruition no matter who He chooses for what purposes, and that Gentiles, and this would have been astonishing, although it's very clear in the Old Testament, if you look for it, if you see it, the Gentiles were always a part of God's plan, in part because Israel was not always faithful. In chapter 10, Paul wrote that the Israelites tried to gain righteousness on their own. And as they sought righteousness on their own, then it means that they really don't understand. And therefore, if they really don't understand, not that they perfectly understand, but that they don't understand the need for faith, and if they don't perfectly understand it, then do they really have faith at all? Do they really believe in God at all? So someone needs to share that faith. And they need to share that works is not the answer. So then to further his argument, Paul shows that what he is writing here are not even his own thoughts. Even if the Jews would have found Paul's arguments persuasive, he would have many centuries to overcome, and certainly very few, if any of the Jews of this day would have said, well, I'm going to listen to Paul over somebody like Isaiah. And so he quotes Isaiah more than any others. In fact, he quotes 4 different prophets. He quotes Isaiah multiple times. He also quotes from Deuteronomy and from the Psalms, all of which would have been important books for the Jews to consider. What is amazing is that of all that Paul wrote, which is at least 12 books of the New Testament, all these letters that he wrote, including Romans, 31%, almost exactly 1/3 of all of the direct citations that he makes from the Old Testament are in these 3 chapters. Now just imagine that. I mean, Romans has 16 chapters. 1 Corinthians 16, 2 Corinthians 13. I mean, he wrote dozens of chapters of text, and 1/3 of every reference that he makes, every direct reference that he makes to the Old Testament are just in these 3 chapters, Romans 9 through 11. Finally, we get to Romans 11, and Paul says that God does have a remnant. God always has a remnant. God is faithful, even to Israel. He has a remnant within Israel. He did not promise to save everyone that was from Abraham's genetic descent. He didn't promise to save all the natural descendants of Abraham, but all of those who have Abraham's faith, he did promise to save, and he has saved. So for now, the primary audience then and now is the Gentiles. But when that time ends, when the fullness of the Gentiles comes in, as we'll see in a few weeks, as the fullness of the Gentiles comes in, Israel will have an opportunity to believe, unlike anything that they have in at least the last 2,000 years. And then at the end of this section, the very end of Romans 11, Paul ends with a great doxology, saying that no one knows the mind of God, that He is in full control, that He is faithful, and that we can trust in those truths regardless of whatever may be happening around us. These 3 chapters are a great set of verses for us to study. Even if they seemingly are mostly to the Jews, the Israelites of yesteryear, somewhat to the Gentiles, that idea of God's faithfulness and continuing to fulfill His promises, if nothing else, because since we are still here, the fullness of the Gentiles has not yet come in. It is important to us as well today.